Hey. Let's try round part 2. Do apologise, I was having some technical difficulties on the microphone and now I'm breaking my cameras. All good, it's fine. We can handle a few problems. Let's get rid of that one. May need to adjust things. Might just need to wait a minute for people to arrive. Refocus you guys. Hello. Hi. I know I'm so sorry, but it's really good now. Okay. Right. Brilliant. So we're working again. Is that what you're telling me, Stella? Are we working again? Do we have voice control once more? Oh, that was a nightmare. I hate technology. I was actually having a few complications. I was having a few complications prior to the live. I was having quite a lot of technical issues going on. Yes, I was. It was very complicated. So that's been a bit of an issue. Sorry about that. I'm also just trying to work out how now for sure, because obviously the old link won't work now. Oh, it's good fun. How are you, Stella, anyway? I think you said previously in the last live that Stella is actually doing a lot better now. Is that right? Share onto Instagram so that people actually know where we are. Stories. Links. Very complicated, all this live streaming stuff. Sorry, tech issues. Oh dear, good fun. Hello again, everyone. How are we? Sorry about that. I was just actually saying to Stella that I had quite a few technical issues before I actually started this live. I've been fighting with my computer for a good hour trying to get everything to work. So I'm not surprised that things were going array and audio suddenly started cutting off. So hopefully you can all hear me a lot better now. And Charlie's less aggressive, but still sounds sensitive. Yeah, I know how you feel. Yes, you're sound sensitive right now, aren't you? Yeah. Madam up there, Charlie's little, I want to say Charlie's copycat, but copycat would be the wrong word. But Lyra is having a few similar issues. Every time she sees a magpie, she screams. If we leave the room and she can hear us, she screams. If we leave her in here and just about as we leave the door, she screams. If we try and have a conversation, she starts screaming and making noise. If we try and be on our phones, she starts screaming. If we're in the shower, she starts screaming. Don't you? Yes, lots and lots of screaming. And this is something that people don't realize when they actually want to get a Pionus. Pionus scream just as much as any other species of bird. They don't scream as often. They don't scream constantly throughout the day, but they still scream a lot, to the point where you literally shout at them because I shut up. We love you, but you're noisy. Constantly through the day. It's so fun. How are the girls doing? Any hormones kicking in yet? Yeah. Hello, how are you? How is Mav? Is Mav doing okay? How's he with his hormones at the moment? Because I know he's just starting puberty at the moment. And yes, as you can tell, hormones are in full swing because Lyra only gets screamy during hormones. And she has been the nesty little rat bag for the last week or two. She's only just started getting territorial of her bedtime cage, but she's nowhere near as bad as she was last year. And yeah, you're nowhere near as bad as you used to be, but she's getting extremely nesty around the house. She is constantly trying to nest underneath my desk. She is trying to eat all my towels. My towels are getting ripped apart by this little menace trying to make nests out of them, which is driving me insane because obviously I do not want her eating those. They are not something to nibble at, madam. Yes. And then she's also started chewing her cotton perch up there. So we actually are having to plan to take that down sometime soon because it is getting a bit of a nightmare. But yes, as I was saying earlier, if you guys have any questions, comments, or queries that you want to ask, I am not expert in particular, but I have done a lot of research, so I will try to answer any questions that you have about Pionus parrots or parrots in general as best as I can. If you do want general parrot care information, best channels I can recommend is the Parrot Teacher, Bird Nerd Sophie. Bird Tricks has a few good ones on their channel. Soaring Wings Training, Mikey and Mia. There's loads out there with a lot of good general parrot information. Mikey and Mia are more core based. Soaring Wings Training are more cockatiels and free flight and things like that. And then Bernard, Sophie, and Parrot Teacher are general overall parrot care. So there's lots of places for you to actually find general parrot information. I always suggest don't just trust one person. Please get your information from multiple sources and make your own decisions. So let's see, who else have we got on here today? Oh, guys have had a spike in hormonal behavior. With the mornings getting lighter, time to deploy the blackout blinds. Agree. I really need to invest in some blackout blinds when we move. As I was saying at the start of my last live, we have not yet moved house. We are still stuck in this property. So the girls have not yet got their own designated bird room. But when they do, we will be investing in blackout blinds because, my gosh, blackout blinds are a godsend. He's doing well, thank you. Only mauled one person this week. I like that. I like that he's only mauled the one person so far. That's a good start. That's a really good start. So puberty is a nightmare. It's a nightmare for anyone at any time. And would you believe that the main time that most parrots get rehomed is during puberty? Little fun fact there. Majority of parrots that get rehomed when they hit puberty because they go from this cute, adorable little baby that people bought them as to a teenager. And that is all it is they are a teenager. And guess what? Even human teenagers are a nightmare. They are argumentative. They want to make up their own minds. They want to do their own thing. They think they know best, blah, 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 blah. Parrot teenagers are exactly the same. And they are a nightmare to deal with. And they are hell. And because of that, most people end up rehoming their parrots when they hit teenage years, which is why a lot of parrots in rescues you will find are around teenage years for that particular species. So 3 to 4 for things like Pionus and conures and smaller birds. And then I think it's, I want to say 4 to 6 for the medium birds. So like your Amazons and your African greys. And then I think it's 6 to 7 for macaws. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I know that the bigger the bird, the later the puberty. And again, you'll find that most birds do actually get rehomed during their puberty years, which is why a lot of birds in rehomes are actually on the younger side because they went through puberty and people couldn't handle them. So they ended up getting rid of them. And that's one of the joys of owning birds. That is one of the best parts of owning birds is when they go through puberty and they do change, they do start biting, they do start lunging, they do become territorial. And it is one of the hardest parts of owning a parrot and one of the parts that most people can't cope with, which is why they end up getting rehomed. So I did answer in the first part of the live what my girls generally eat in a day. One of the other questions I have got asked is when am I going to start teaching about free flying? Now, that is a very complicated topic. That is a very, very complicated topic because every single bird is different. Every single bird needs to learn differently. Every single species of bird needs to be trained slightly differently. Every single individual bird will have different needs, whether or not it's their confidence levels, whether or not it's their independence, whether or not it's their stubbornness, whether or not they're wanting to do big flies or little flies. For example, Lyra is quite happy to do great big loops around the garden or in the trees, whereas Quaffle will happily just do an A to B constantly all day. Won't even think about it. So trying to train free flight online like this or on YouTube videos is pretty much impossible. I could probably tell you the basic training requirements, but I would not be able to tell you when your individual bird is ready for training, which is why a lot of people actually recommend free flight mentors. I am technically self-taught when it comes to free flight. However, I got the majority of my information and training advice from already free flying friends. The reason I am actually mainly self-taught is because there wasn't anyone in the UK knowingly flying Pionus parrots or free flying Pionus parrots. So I had no one to talk to. I had no one to get advice from about how to fly this particular species. So I had to just take general free flying advice from my friends who already had first-hand experience in free flight training and then try and adapt it to their individual species. Didn't we? And it worked. As you can see, we've got two very capable free flyers, although you're still a bit spooky. You are. And as you can see, she's nice and noisy at the moment. It's fun, aren't you? Noisy girl, noisy girl. But we are going to be doing a slight training series, hopefully very soon. One of the reasons our videos have been so delayed is because we didn't know when we were going to be moving. We've been trying to organize the house, trying to declutter, etc. So I've not really had a lot of time to actually record or plan any videos. And I do apologize about that because it is one of those. Moving house is stressful as it is. Having to wait for the delay in moving house is even worse. So I've not actually been planning any videos because I don't know whether or not I could record them, whether or not we were going to get the call that we're going to have to start renovating this new house, how long that house renovation was going to take. One of the videos I want to make is setting up the bird room for these girls and how we go about it, how we plan it, how we design it, etc., etc. So it made it very difficult to actually try and plan around. But we are going to be doing a training series. I want to be doing a training series this year with the basic training that all birds should have. And I'm not just talking about trick training and clicker training, although those will be included. I'm on about the necessary basic flight skills that all birds should have, whether or not you've planned to free fly or not. And these skills are very important because if your bird does get out accidentally, not on purpose, not I decided to try free flying, give it a go and threw my bird outside and hope for the best. No, no, no. I don't advocate for that. What I mean is, if your bird does get out by accident and only by accident because someone left a window open that was visiting your house or someone walked through the door and the bird did a beeline, these are the necessary flight skills to allow your bird to attempt to get back to you safely. Those are the kind of things we are going to be discussing. Now, most of these are essential in free flight training as well. However, there is a lot more to free flight training as I do apologize, Mavzona. My brain just realized I've forgotten your name. Your name is not entering my head right now. But as Mav's owner is finding, there is a lot more to free flight than just flight training. There is so much more you need to know about. So I will unfortunately not be doing an exact free flight training series, but I will be doing a training series based on essential training skills that I believe all birds should have, regardless of whether or not you free fly them or not. So that will hopefully be coming soon. So again, guys, if you have any questions or comments or want to chat about anything, please make sure you leave a comment so we can have a natter in the chat room and I can obviously answer those questions as best as I can. Thank you, Mark. Do apologize. I am so sorry. Mark and Mav. That's got a nice, quite nice little ring to it there. I love your approach. It's also hard when there are almost no Pionus free flyers out there, right? Right? There probably is more than we realize. However, when I was actually looking for free flying Pionus or free flying, or to find out whether or not it's even possible to free fly a Pionus, there was only 2 videos online. That's it, 2 videos. One was somewhere in Europe, I want to say, and I don't think that's right. And I think one was in the Philippines, and both of them were baby birds, like baby birds, not even 6-7 months old. And so I couldn't really go off them. It's like it gave me confidence that Pionus could be free flight or free flight trained, but there was nothing to prove those birds continued free flight into their adult years. And here in the UK, apparently there is someone else in the UK that has free flown Pionus. However, they are not on social media. They are not online. There is no evidence as to who this person is because apparently they like to stay private, and that's fine. I think like if you want to stay private in your personal life, that's perfectly fine. Go do that. I have no issues with that whatsoever. But because that person stayed quiet and because there is literally no one who has an adult free flying Pionus that I could find, it made trying to find out information about flying these guys very difficult. And it was only after I free flight trained these guys, I found out there is actually someone in Italy. I want to say Italy. There's a guy in Italy and he's got a lot of pets. He's got a lot of birds. He's got like almost one of every species. He's got a large collection. And he does actually have a free-flying bronze-wing Pionus that free flies with his galah cockatoo because, believe it or not, they have very similar flight styles. Granted, Pionus parrots actually fly very similarly to Amazons. They fly very My words are going from me now. They fly very, very similarly to Amazons, as I found out from my friend Parrot Palace, who has a huge collection of Zons. She's known as the Amazon Queen in the free flight community. And we've had a lot of discussions about how similar Amazons and Pionus parrots actually are. And I do want to do a video with her at some point, explaining or going through and communicating and chatting about the differences between Amazons and Pionus, because I do find it quite fascinating. It is very, very interesting. What do you think are the odds to train a bronze ring Pionus on an aviator? I think the odds are very high, but they are difficult. What I mean is, Quaffle is aviator harness trained. Lyra started aviator harness training, but she hated it. And it isn't necessarily a bronze wing Pionus thing. It is just that she herself is quite claustrophobic. She doesn't like to be contained. As you can see there, how she moves away, just from me trying to touch her head. She's like, no, do not like closed and tight spaces, until she's feeling nesty. And then the tighter, the darker, the better. But when it comes to the aviator harness, she doesn't like it physically touching her. She doesn't like it being restricted on her body. She doesn't like even being locked in the cage for longer periods of time, because she doesn't like it. She likes that freedom. She likes to feel comfortable and open. So because of that, it's been very difficult to try and train her on the aviator harness. Whereas Quaffle, who trusts me with all her heart, had no issues getting trained on it whatsoever. So it's not necessarily the individual species, but the training itself. You have to take aviator harness training, or harness training in general, very, very slowly at the bird's pace. They will tell you or give you an idea of when it's okay to push a little bit more, when to start adjusting, when to start pushing a little bit further. And then you'll have ones like Lyra, who is just no. And Soaring Wings training will tell you the same. They've got several cockatiels. Some of them are harness trained and have no issues on the harness, like Paco. And then there are others that just will not go on a harness full stop. And that's an individual preference on the birds. That's simple, unfortunately. But it is possible. It is very much possible. There are several Pionus. If you go on the Pionus Parrots Facebook pages, there are multiple bronze wing Pionus parrots that are actually trained on aviator harnesses and go out regularly on the aviator harness. One example is Onyx, the bronze wing Pionus. He goes out on an aviator harness quite regularly with his owner. Watch those on repeat. I know exactly which ones. Yep. Glad I can now watch Lyra and Quaffle. Yep, I know. I'm glad you know which ones they are. They are not very common. Pionus parrot videos on YouTube in general are not common, which is a shame. It is a huge shame, because we don't get to see enough of you guys. But at the same time, I'm also grateful that there's not too many videos of Pionus parrots, because, as I said earlier, a lot of people get these birds and then rehome them around puberty age because of how aggressive and territorial they become. So it would be a shame to see all these people start making YouTube channels and all these people starting posting, and then the birds not lasting, or that channel not lasting more than 2, maybe 3 years, which would be heartbreaking. So in a way, I am glad that there's not too many more, but at the same time, it is a shame, isn't it? It is. In fact, did anyone see Mikey and Mia's recent video about how parrots should not be pets? What was your thoughts and opinions on that? I feel like I want to share my opinion. At the same time, I don't, because I have a very, very similar opinion, but a slightly different opinion at the same time. Because in that video, Daddy Human did a very, very good job of explaining how, how even if parrots weren't in the pet trade, we as humans would probably still want to own them, because we like exotic things, and exotic things seem expensive in like admirable in our eyes. So even if parrots weren't in the pet trade, there would probably be some people that would still happily pay someone on the black market to go out and poach these animals from the wild, and majority of them wouldn't even survive coming back. So in a way, I am glad that there are parrots in the pet trade to prevent or reduce the chances of poaching, or the opportunity for poaching. However, I do feel like parrots in the pet trade are currently overpopulated. What we should be doing is trying to encourage, or anyone that does breed or is breeding should increase the amount of parrots in the wild. So any bird that is bred in captivity, some of those chicks should be going to breeding programs to help increase the wild populations. That is my opinion on it. But at the same time, while I do believe parrots should be wild animals and do better as wild animals, I also can't advocate for it because I know how much deforestation and habitat loss is happening in the wild, and that parrots are actually thriving better in captivity than they are in the wild at the moment, which is heartbreaking. It is literally devastating to think that humans are actually causing so much destruction, and partially because of our love for these creatures, we are also destroying them at the same time, which is it's hard. Sorry, that went a bit south then. Let's try and perk things back up. Are you about to poo? You is, yeah, little one. Nice try. Nice try. Yeah, I saw that. I saw that trying to poo on me. Rude. Go on, over there. Madam. Yes, you. Rude. You're just as bad. You only come on to me to poo as well. This is another one. Quaffle is actually quite funny. She will literally fly over me. She will ignore me completely for about 20 minutes and then fly over just to poo on me. You do. You can't even deny it. It's your favorite trait. Yeah. And now there's a drink screaming in the background because she wants that time. Yellow Jinx. Meow. I don't know if you can actually hear her on the camera. She's screaming in the background. It's quite funny. Just saw the beginning of it and I get what they mean, but kind of disagree on some level and agree on others. Yeah, same. Again, that's what I mean. I'm exactly the same. I think it's dangerous to glorify the wilds from the knowledge and welfare classes. Exactly. But didn't watch the whole thing yet, so I won't say too much. I did watch the whole thing. And like I said, a lot of it I do agree with. Some of it I don't agree with, just because, again, I know that in the wild, these guys have a lifespan of 30 to 40 years. For anyone that didn't know, Pionus parrots do have a lifespan of 30, 40 years. In the wild, they probably live on average 10 to 15 years maximum because of how badly they lose habitat, how easily they're poached and how easily they're captured, how easily they're caught by predators, etc., etc. They're also more access to disease, etc., etc. So the way I see it is there are pros and cons to both. There are pros to parrots being in captivity. There are cons to parrots being in captivity, but there are also pros and cons to parrots being in the wild. Part of me does feel that by parrots being in captivity, you can get people like myself, BirdNerd Sophie, Parrot Teacher, even Bird Tricks, or all these other YouTubers that can actively promote better care for these parrots and better husbandry for these parrots so that they can have the best life possible in captivity in a safe environment, while also raising education and awareness about the species and the problems that they have in the wild. Whereas at the same time, I also wish that there were more restrictions and more licenses and things like that and qualifications required in order to own these particular animals, because so many parrots get rehomed. So many. Majority of them never have a lifelong home. A lot of them do when they go to good owners, and when they go to owners that do the research, do the care, and do their history. They do the species research, the food research, the diet research, the exercise research, the enrichment research. For those kind of owners that do all that background stuff, they do make great pets. But for people, the majority of people that get parrots, unfortunately, don't do that research, don't do their homework, don't do their diet history, their care history, their husbandry and everything else. And it's those kind of people that cause the biggest problems for parrots in captivity, unfortunately. So I do agree with you on the wild is not a Disney-like place. It's definitely not. It's incredibly hard, and many companion parrots would have no chance of survival, even with training and rehabilitation. It's true. It is very true. Even though parrots are not domesticated in any way, shape, or form, parrots that have been bred in captivity have less wild instincts. They don't know how to forage. They don't know how to find water. They don't know what plants and vegetables are safe. And if you do try and integrate them into a wild flock, there's an exceedingly high possibility that they will actually be pushed away and die from not having a flock to protect them. So it's a very difficult and very complicated scenario. But the wild, if the wild was a safer place from humans, then I would advocate these birds not being in captivity at all. However, being in captivity and being able to raise awareness for the species and the care, in my opinion, is as good as them being in the wild permanently and becoming extinct. So it's a hard one. It swings and roundabouts. As I said, there's pros and cons to both. And I do agree with a lot of what Daddy Human said, but there's also things that I'm trying to think of the right wording for it, and I can't think of the right wording for it. But basically, I see as many cons to them living in the wild as I see cons to them living in captivity. Let's put it that way. All right. I watched the video too. I think maybe something like an owner license. I agree. Yep. Highly agree with the owner license. I think every animal that is in captivity should have an owner license. I really do believe that. I believe every owner who wants to own any pet of any form should have to go through like a mini course. As an example, I used to be a security guard. Fun little fact about me, I used to do security guarding, and to get a security guard license, you have to do a mini 3-4 day course and pass a test at the end in order to get that license to say that you are allowed to do your job. And you have to renew that license every 3 to 4 years. So I personally think we should have something similar for owning pets. You should have to go on a course, learn how to correctly look after the pet, how to correctly care for it, how to correctly enrich it, blah, 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 and then have to have a license to say that you are qualified to own that pet, or that you are allowed to own your pet because you have gone through that necessary training. That is my opinion. And that's my opinion for all animals, be it dogs, cats, rabbits, guinea pigs, doesn't matter. I think every owner, every person that wants to look after a pet should be able to prove that they have the knowledge it takes or have put the effort in to learn what it takes to look after that individual animal. So I'm a very much a big advocate for licenses on animals in any way, shape, or form. Good boy. Good girl, even. Why did I call you a boy then? That was weird. I've not said good boy in a long time. It's because I was on a dog walk yesterday with a male dog. That's what it is. I've got a good boy in my head still. Boy, what was he up to? Somewhat species appropriate. Yep, I agree. Pirates are way more complicated. They are a lot more complicated, aren't they? I think we all need to work together to raise standards of higher welfare. I agree. Highly agree on that one. I would also still love to see less birds being bred, but sadly, it's easy money for breeders and don't need experience. Isn't that just annoying as hell? And I know that is one thing that, again, Daddy Human did touch on in his video was, is there such a thing as a good breeder? And to me, the answer is yes, because there are breeders out there who are actively trying to breed in order to boost the populations in the wild species. So as an example, some of the species of Pionus you cannot technically get in the pet trade. I say technically because there are some people that have found some loopholes in order to get them, is the coral-billed Pionus and also the plum-headed Pionus. Those two particular types of Pionus you cannot legally get in the pet trade because they are so rare in the wild and so rare in captivity. And because they are so rare in captivity, if we try to reproduce and breed and populate from the ones that are in captivity alone, we would end up with a lot of inbreeding, which would be so dangerous for the species as a whole, for the birds that end up getting produced. So that is why they are not available in the pet trade, because there is not enough in captivity to allow them to be in the pet trade. But at the same time, they are in decline in the wild. So anyone that does breed them has to agree to do all the necessary husbandry and background checks to make sure they're not being interbred, while at the same time trying to boost the wild populations by making sure that they go to like these birds are parent raised, they go to rehabilitation centers to try and increase the populations in the wild. So there are some species of parrot that you physically cannot get in captivity for that reason. And it's annoying because those kind of breeders you need the kind of breeders that are going to do that to help boost those sort of populations. At the same time, again, it is ideal to have some breeders in the pet trade so that we are not taking from the wild species for those people that are desperate enough to be willing to get poachers to try and get some birds for them. So again, the best thing I can say for breeders is if you are looking for a Pionus and you can't find one in a rescue, because I will always advocate rescue over breeding, because again, it's a lot better to take on a bird that's already in its adult stage than to take on a baby and then go through all the puberty and teenage years and nightmare on top of that. And then again, you have to consider these things are going to live 30 to 40 years. Do you have 30 to 40 years left in you? There's a lot to go through. It's very complicated. where was I going with this? But yes, there are good breeders out there in regards to ethical breeders, breeders that only breed a handful of species, like 2, maybe 3 species max. Breeders that do actually put the care and effort in. Their birds have access to aviaries. They get to choose their partners. They get to like have good food. They get enrichment on a regular basis. So, for example, breeder that I got Lyra off, she is an amazing person. Unfortunately, one of the breeders that I got Lyra off, because at one point they were co-rearing, is no longer breeding because it was just getting too much and the birds were getting too expensive, because breeding is an expensive hobby when done right. When done right, breeding is an expensive hobby, and he was doing it right. And the person that mainly hand raised Lyra is still breeding, as far as I'm aware, and she's doing an amazing job. And she is by far one of the best breeders I ever know. She only breeds Pionus, and I think at one point she was breeding Bodgidaris, but that was it. Like, so she breeds a couple of Pionus species or a handful of Pionus species and Bodgidaris, and that's it. All the birds are well cared for. They are put in amazing aviaries, and they are so well looked after and cared for and trained. They get to have outdoor aviary time. And it's just, she's brilliant. And everything is so hygienic and clean. She F10s everything all the time. She's an amazing breeder. And I've got another friend who breeds sun conures, cockatiels, and another type of conure. And I think it's green sheep conure. And again, she's a really good breeder in the sense that her sun conures are all free flight trained, and they all get outdoor time. They all get fresh vegetables every single day. They all get access to outside aviary time. They're really well looked after and cared for. So, and again, she doesn't overbreed. Like, she only lets them have, I think it's 1, maybe 2 clutches a year max. And then if necessary, she'll split them up to stop the breeding and then put them all back together when she's comfortable that breeding season is over. So there are ethical breeders out there, and it's the ethical breeders you want to look for. Not if you find a breeder of a bird that is breeding 20, 30 different species, avoid them like the plague. If you go to a breeder that will not allow you access to see the baby, whether or not that's on video call, whether or not that's you get to go visit them, if you have a breeder that will not allow you to see the condition the parents are cared in, do not have access to that breeder. Don't do it. If you can't see, it's a bit like dog breeding. If you cannot get access to those babies, if that breeder is not comfortable with you physically seeing the parents, or like I said, video call's fine. Video call is absolutely fine because they can still show you around with video call sort of thing. But if you have a breeder that is very, very, I can't let you see this because they know they're doing wrong, don't bother with that breeder. Another challenge is bird shows. For example, the Stafford Bird Show is a breeder's bird show, and it is terrifying to see how many birds are there. There are so many birds, and you can sometimes get Pionus parrots from the Stafford Bird Show. It's not something I encourage because they are mainly aviary and breeding birds, so they don't really trust humans. They don't really like human contact, etc., etc. But it is terrifying how many birds and how many bad breeders that go to those shows. There are some good and ethical breeders that go to those shows, and it is a good way for breeders to intermingle and things like that. But there are a lot of bad breeders that go to those shows, and it is very difficult to know who are the good breeders and who are the bad breeders. As an example, one of my friends, her friend, so a friend of a friend, got a baby budgie recently off what was meant to be a reputable breeder. And turns out this reputable breeder was not necessarily so reputable, which she didn't find out until after she got the budgie. And the budgie had, what was the name of the disease that the budgie ended up being born with? I can't remember the name of the disease, but basically it had no flight feathers. And they hadn't been pulled, they hadn't been clipped. It was born with no flight feathers, and apparently is actually a disease that can be found in budgies, especially if they have not been bred properly or they haven't had the disease checks before being bred. That's another thing. If your breeder is willing to do disease testing prior to you getting that bird, that is probably a good breeder, because disease testing is not cheap, and all good breeders should disease test their birds prior to breeding them. They don't do it every single time, but they at least do it once to know that that bird is safe to be bred without born a virus that doesn't have PBFD, doesn't have polyoma, etc., etc. So if you are looking into a breeder, please do your research into that breeder and make sure that they are a good, ethical breeder that is willing to disease test, or at least can confirm that the parents have been disease tested and can show you the disease test results before you even consider getting a baby. That went on for a bit of a tangent. Sorry about that. I think we all need to work together. I've read that part. Licenses are a great idea, but very difficult to manage and enforce. Unfortunately, I also agree with that. They are a nightmare to enforce, especially with the current overstretched services in this country. I really hate that. I really hate how overstretched the services in this country already are. Especially, I feel so bad for the RSPCA. The RSPCA gets so much negativity, but they've got no funding. They are a charity. They've got no funding, and they've got very restricted laws to actually help them do their job, which is a massive shame. Totally agree. The main problem here is lack of education for many animals and pets. Yep, I can't imagine how many problems it would solve, like overbreeding, rehoming, less sickness. It would solve a lot of problems, but at the same time, again, as Bernard Sophie says, it's very difficult to manage. Got to keep up the great work. Thank you. Fun fact, in Denmark, if you work more than 20 plus hours in a pet store, you need an education or to take courses on pets and their needs. I think it's a step in the right direction. It's definitely a step in the right direction. I believe there's a company here in the UK called Pets at Home. And I remember I actually went for a job application for there once, long time ago, before I had my business. And they did actually have a course where you had to go on a course in order to learn how to look after each of the individual pets. So that was actually pretty good. Pets at Home are, even though they have a bad reputation, and I don't agree with them selling live animals, that's a personal thing, but they do actually make sure that their staff are well educated on the care of the animals, which is actually really nice to see. It is really, really nice to see. Do you guys have any other questions, comments, or concerns that you would like to ask while we are on? What are you doing? Why are you staring at me? Would you like a treat? Come in. Treaties? No? Yes? Treaties. Always come for treaties. Yeah. Yeah. You done? Can you do me a spin? Thank you very much. Yeah. You get to have one too, but you need to do a spin. No, don't get grumpy. Do a spin first. Thank you very much. You see how all of her underfluffs here are starting to puff? That's Lyra getting grouchy. That's going overexcited and grouchy. Yes. Overexcited and grouchy. You've still got hair in your nostril. You've still got a feather in your nostril. Have you seen? Seeing something outside, that's why they're burring. So if you did not know what that noise was, that is a warning noise to say, I've seen something. I don't know what it is. It might be danger. You good? Come on then. Come on then. Thank you very much. Yeah. Come on. Sorry, they've not had any training all day yet, so they're getting a little edgy and a little angsty. Oh, I'm trying to think what other questions people have had for me recently online that I've been trying to answer. Talking about breeders, I don't know if it's just me, but do you ever get the, why don't you mate your females, or why don't you breed them? At least once a week. At least once a week. I get so many Instagram messages and direct messages asking me, do you breed? Can I have one of the birds? No, I don't breed. I never intend to be a breeder. I never want to be a breeder because I would not be able to rehome any of the birds. To be a breeder, like even to be an ethical breeder, you have to have that mentality that the birds will never be your pets and they will eventually move on to a new home. And the thing that stops me from even considering breeding is because I would never know where the birds end up. Like, you can vet that owner, you can vet that home as much as you want, but you cannot guarantee that in 20 years' time that bird is still going to be with them. You can't guarantee it because circumstances change. Like, that person may have a kid and decide they can't look after a bird and a child. That person may end up needing to move country. That person may end up being in a situation where they have to literally flee because they're in an abusive relationship and they've got to leave all the belongings and things behind and just move. And unfortunately, the bird gets left behind with all the belongings. It could be a case of that person, knock on wood, that never happens to anyone. It could be a case of the person ends up in hospital long term or suffers some sort of paralysis. They may end up going blind. That something major could happen to them and that bird then has to move on. And I wouldn't be able to do that. I wouldn't be able to rehome any birds that I bred to anyone knowing that I don't know where that person's future is going. I don't know whether or not that person will be capable or have that bird for its entire life. And that's another thing with parrots, especially with Pionus parrots living 30 to 40 years. It's a long time. And I got these girls, I got Quaffle when I was 33. So I knew that I would be about 70 if she lasted 40 years. And same with Lyra. I was 35, no, 34. I was 34 or 35 when we got Lyra. And again, I knew that in 40 years' time, which is like the maximum the average Pionus lasts to, I knew I would still be in retirement age. So the chances of them outliving me is extremely slim. And that's one of the reasons I actually went for Pionus parrots, because something that not a lot of people consider when they do get a parrot. And again, Daddy Human actually covered this in his little rant video recently, is people don't realize that when they get a baby bird or a baby parrot, that parrot could outlive them. And this happens with a lot of people who get baby macaws or baby cockatoos, baby African greys. That bird gets to 40 or 50, and that person's life is currently in the 70s, 80s, and they can no longer care for that bird for whatever reason, because for whatever reason, they're now in hospital, or they're, knock on wood, this doesn't happen to anyone, but they get cancer or something major happens because they've reached a very elderly age. That bird's still got another 30 years in it. The human that said that they're going to be its lifelong home is on their deathbed. Sorry, that's gone really downhill again, hasn't it? But again, that is something everyone should consider when getting a parrot. You should really do your research into how long this species is going to survive. And are you going to outlive it? Or is there a higher possibility or higher chance that you are going to outlive the parrot over the parrot outliving you? Because if the parrot's going to outlive you, you need to have that parrot in your will, so that should anything happen to you, the parrot has somewhere safe to go to, who you can trust and who you know. And you will be surprised at how many people unfortunately lose their life. And then the parrot is left to someone in that person's will, or left behind not in the will. And then that parrot gets rehomed because the person it was left to doesn't want to look after it and doesn't want to keep it. You know what I mean? It's a very complicated situation. So, and now the unknown fate of 50 birds will keep you awake at night. Exactly. The unknown fate of, this is why I could never be a breeder. I would never be able to do, like, it would be nice, but I would like to be the breeder. I would like to be the kind of breeder that rehabilitates the birds to go back to be wild. That's the kind, if I was to breed birds, that would be the breeder I would be. And again, the wild isn't necessarily the best place. You can't guarantee how long the birds are going to survive. You can't guarantee if they're going to be susceptible to disease. You can't guarantee how quickly they're going to interact with a predator, whether or not they're actually going to learn how to forage, whether or not they're going to learn how to find water. If they just happen to be a lazy flyer like Quaffle, there's actually a high probability they won't even attempt to escape from a predator. Or if they do try and fly, I wouldn't be surprised if Quaffle flew straight into a predator's mouth. She's a bit clumsy in her flight patterns. So it's one of those. I would never want to breed. I do commend people that have the ability to breed and still care for the birds, because that unknowing or that knowledge of you don't know where that animal's gone, you don't know how that animal is, what they're doing, if they have gone to a good home, that'd terrify me. That would absolutely terrify the life out of me. Anyway, let's go on to a bit of a better topic. One thing or one common comment I have seen on the Pionus Parrots forums is, how do you stop them from screaming? How do we do it, Lyra? How do we stop you from screaming? Is it even possible? No, it's not. That is a fun fact. There are tricks and training you can do. And again, I believe BirdNerd Sophie and Parrot Teacher and a few other channels have done several videos on how you can teach your bird not to scream as much, but it's not very common. It is very difficult to train a bird to not scream. And unfortunately, this is a piece of advice that I physically can't give, because as a free flyer, we want the birds to scream, which is really annoying, because if they get spooked and get lost, how do we find them? They scream. They scream a lot. They scream loud, and we can hear them from quite a distance away. And we can identify their screams over the other wild local birds. So we can't physically train them not to scream, because if we train them not to scream and they go disappearing and they decide to stay quiet because they've been taught to stay quiet, we might never find the birds again. So we can't stop them from screaming. So because I can't stop them from screaming, or I can't discourage them from screaming, I also don't know how to stop other birds screaming. Best thing to do on that situation is consult a bird behaviorist, like, again, Bird and Sophie, parrot teacher, soaring wings training, all those kind of people. Go consult those guys. They will have a lot better information for you and to how to reduce a bird screaming than I can. It's very challenging. It's very fun, especially when the screaming fest starts, isn't it? But to be honest, Pionus parrots do make an interesting pet to have. They are a lot cuter than people actually realize. A lot of them call them boring birds because they don't really do anything all day, but they are so sweet and so nice after puberty. I talk about puberty a lot, but that's because I've gone through nearly 5 years worth of puberty. 4 years. When did we get you, Quaffle? December 2021. 1, 2, 3. I've gone through over 3 years of puberty with these girls right now. It's been 3 years of constant puberty because Quaffle started with it. And then as Quaffle finished puberty, Lyra started puberty. So we've had 4 years of puberty, 3 years of puberty. I'm losing track of my days. Yeah. But I tell you what, now that Quaffle has finished her puberty, I can't even see where you are in the background, Quaffle. She's on the training perch over there. Now that Quaffle's actually finished puberty and settled into her adult self, because she's nearly 6. Quaffle's nearly 6 years old now. We got her when she was 1.5 years, and she's 6 in May. And she is so much calmer and so sweet and so nice and so docile now. She still has screaming fits, just like Lyra does, but they are a lot less than what Lyra's can be. And on top of that, Quaffle is so much more manageable now. Like, she doesn't really get territorial as much anymore. She doesn't get as angry or aggressive. If she does get angry and aggressive, she can control herself so much better. So much better than what she used to be able to do. Oh, it's so funny. It is so, so funny. And it does make us giggle because she's completely different now to what she was when we first got her. That little territorial, biting, grumpy monster. And now she's a little sweetie pie. And we cannot wait for next year when this one starts calming down as well. Nesty monster. Yes. Another problem we're having at the moment is bird flu. Fun fact for anyone that owns Pionus parrots, you do need to be aware of bird flu regulations, because bird flu regulations could affect your bird, especially if, like us, you are training for free flight or you take your bird out regularly on a harness. So at the moment, we are actually in an avian influenza mandatory housing zone because there has been a case confirmed a couple of towns over from us. So they do a massive lockdown of the local areas just to be sure that, or try and reduce the spread as much as possible. And again, if you do take your birds outdoors, whether or not they have an outdoor aviary, whether or not you take them out in a harness and put them into trees, like I used to do with Quaffle, whether or not you are a free flyer, you do need to be aware of the bird avian influenza. Another reason you have to be aware of bird influenza, even if you are not a free flyer or take your bird outside, is because if you interact with any wild birds that potentially contain bird flu, you need to come home and do a full head to toe wash down before you interact with your birds, because bird flu is very, very, very contagious for birds. Very freaking contagious. It can last on surfaces for a really long time, which means, as an example, let's say a seagull flew overhead, pooed on your back. If that seagull had bird flu, that bird flu is now on your back and it's on your clothes and it will spread. And if you accidentally touch that bird poo and then start wiping your hands and everything else, the bird flu is now on your hands. You go home, you interact with your bird. You've now just had a chance that your bird's contracted bird flu. So please, if you are in an avian influenza zone, or if you need access to the avian influenza map, please check it regularly and keep your parrot safe. It is very, very important. And at the moment, it's not too bad. It's a lot calmer this year than it was last year, but it is still spreading. It is still going round, and there are new cases of it appearing every single day. As an example, Jason works at the Salford Quays Leisure Centre. No, he doesn't. He does, but he doesn't. He works at the Salford Quays Water Sports Centre, and right next to the Water Sports Centre, they have a massive collection of geese and swans and seagulls. And last year, I believe it was, there was actually a confirmed case of bird influenza at their site. And every single day, Jason had to make sure that he would get a shower at work before he came home. He would then come home, throw his clothes straight in the wash, and then get a shower before he would even interact with the birds, because it is that deadly. And we do not want to risk our girls getting it. So even now, we are being very, very strict on how we take the girls out. We are only really taking them out on backpack walks. We have gone into the garden for a fly once because the girls were getting really edgy and grouchy and grumpy, and it was driving us insane. So we did let them out for a 2-minute fly, but we made sure that they flew between us, so they didn't land on anything in the garden. They didn't land on any grasses or any of the perches or any of the stands, so that there was a reduced chance of them actually touching anything that could potentially contain bird flu. And again, even though bird flu is not in our area, that just means it hasn't been confirmed in our area yet. There's no guarantee that it hasn't come over here. So it's really annoying. We are in the bird equivalent of lockdown right now. So we can't go out free flying. We can't really go out exploring or take the girls on hikes or walks or meet up with our friends and go flying with our friends. It's really infuriating. It's a nightmare of a time. So between not having, you about to poo again? No. So between not yet moving house, bird flu, and everything else going on, it's a bit of a nightmare, chaotic time right now, but it is fun. But yes, please, 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 please be very careful with bird flu around at the moment, especially if you are in the process of free flight training, because I know some of you, like Mark, is. Please be careful and you check the map regularly to make sure that you are outside of any mandatory housing zones, or that you are away from any confirmed cases before you actually take your birds outside. Very important. Please stay safe. Great. We've got about 10 minutes left of this live. Are there any other questions or comments that people would like to be answered? I'm trying to actually think of any more comments that questions that people have had for me recently. I know one of them is one question I've had recently is there a big difference between Pionus species like bronzewings and whitecaps? And the answer is no, because every bird is an individual and every individual bird has a different personality. So even though there are stereotypes that count for about 50% of the bird population or that bird species, every bird is a unique individual. And as an example, Pionus are known for being quiet. However, they are as loud as the household. The louder the household, the louder the bird. That is just a fact among all parrots. All parrot species are like that. The louder the household, the louder the bird. And it's actually quite fun. I was just literally before this live stream watching the parrot teacher and bird nerd Sophie's videos about their new little cockatiel Cole. And I think it was the parrot teacher's video. Cole started barking because he grew up, or he was in a house with dogs. And so he learnt to mimic the bark of the dogs. And he had a nice little barking sesh through the video, which was very, very cute. But that is actually a good example of how the parrots mimic the environment. The noisier the environment, the noisier the parrot. And I do want to do a video at some point explaining Pionus parrot communication. So, for example, Vet Tech Stella or Vet Student Stella recently did a really good video explaining some of the noises and the cues of Pionus parrots, which was really, really good. Highly recommend to go watch that video. And it made me giggle because it's like, I want to do one myself explaining body language and noises and sounds and things like that. But at the same time, I also feel it's quite difficult to do that kind of video because, again, the parrots pick up the noise of their environment. So there might be some noises and sounds that my girls make that other Pionus parrots don't make, because this is the normal communication of their flock. This is their flock's accent. This is their flock sounds. And you will find this in a lot of birds, is they pick up the accent of the flock as a whole. So if you have an accent, your parrot will probably pick up your accent when it starts to try and mimic you, or if it starts to try and mimic you. And again, with the case of, I've got a bit of dry mouth now, I've been talking so long. Quick stop for water break. But another one is that, yeah, but there are a lot of similarities. So, for example, like I said, the burring noise earlier is a very common trait in Pionus, and the strut is a very common trait in Pionus parrot body language. It's good fun. It's all good fun. Wait, we've got 5 minutes left. No one's asked any further questions, so I will get ready to finish up this video by saying, as I said, we are still hoping to do a training system. It's really fascinating. I would love to see. Oh, thank you, Stella. I hope to make it at some point. I do hope to make a training series, as I said, doing basic tricks that I believe all parrots should know for their own safety, if nothing else. I also want to do a series or a video, as I said, doing about Pionus parrot behavior, body language. I have a list. I have a massive list of videos that I want to make. I still need to make a video with BirdNerd Sophie. I still want to make a video with my friend Fruity Flock. Stella, I still need to do a video with you about your experience trying to take on a second bird and how that went for you versus how it went for me. I still want to do a video with my friend Parrot Palace and compare again Pionus parrots to Amazons. I want to do a video with my friend House of Conyers and compare her son Conyers to Pionus parrots. I've got so many videos I want to make, and I've just not had the opportunity to make any because, again, of the house move that still hasn't happened, trying to sort out the house, trying to sort of declutter this place. Bye-bye. As well as look after the girls, as well as run my business. It's been a very complicated last 6 months, 7 months. Oh, it's been fun. Right. I think I'm going to end this video here, guys. Thank you ever so much for joining me today. It has been lovely to chat to some of you, and hopefully I've answered a couple of questions that people have had. And hopefully we'll do this again sometime. And next time, please make sure to pop in your questions if you do have any so that I can answer them as and when needed. Right. Bye-bye, guys. Thank you very much for watching. It was lovely to see you all, and I hope to see you again very soon. And I am going to do my very, very, very best to try and get some more videos out for you very soon, starting, hopefully, with the training series where we start right from scratch, right from day one. So thank you very much, and bye-bye.